Today we're going to go over how to replace the control arm bushings on a C5 Corvette. Alright, before we get started, we're going to go over some of the tools. It's good to have a pretty thorough tool selection. You're going to need mostly 18mm socket, a 22mm wrench, 24mm wrench. This is pretty important to measure your ride height, so have a good tool to measure your ride height with before you take it apart. So that way when you put it back together, you can set it to the same exact ride height. A couple pry bars are pretty good to have. A mallet. I bought this for the upper control arm. It's got it from Harbor Freight. It's a ball joint separator, and it's always helpful to have some air. You're definitely going to need a hacksaw, and we'll run into that later. I'll show you how to do that. And then to get the bushings out, I used another Harbor Freight tool, a ball joint remover kit, and let me see if I can get the cover to it. It's a ball joint service kit for 2- and 4-wheel drive vehicles. So with that, we'll get going. First step is removing the wheel. The reason I'm replacing the control arm bushings, actually there's two reasons. One, mine are worn out, and secondly, performance. LG Motorsports, they have a really good video out, and it shows the rear wheel under acceleration and braking, and you can actually see the gap between the wheel and the fender, and under hard acceleration the wheel actually shifts forward and aft about an inch. So with that shifting under acceleration and braking, that's going to change the alignment, and in turn it's going to affect performance. So not only are my bushings worn out, but I'm looking to improve performance. So I'm going to be replacing it with this kit right here. It's an energy suspension polyurethane bushing kit. Now the half ones are set up for the upper control arm, and then the complete ones are set up for the lower control arm. And it's complete, and it comes with the front. I believe this is the rear, and then one for the shock mount. It doesn't come with any of the sleeves or the metal pieces to it, so you have to reuse the original metal ones, which causes a little bit of an issue, but we'll work through that. The way we're going to do this, we're going to do the upper control arm first, then we'll reinstall it, and then we'll do the lower control arm. And in doing that, we'll be able to keep the hub assembly and drive shaft intact without taking it off and causing extra work. So with that, what we're going to do is remove the upper control arm, and there's two 18mm bolts, one in the rear and see one in the front. It's just the bolt. The nuts are captured nuts, so you don't need anything on the back side. You can kind of see that one right there on the rear side. And then the ball joint splitter, we're going to use that to remove the upper control arm from the hub assembly. Now if you don't have a splitter, if you tap lightly on the aluminum control arm where it mounts, where the stud comes through, it will usually separate. Just kind of tap on it pretty easily. These are aluminum, so they will separate fairly easily. So with that, I'm going to pull this apart, and then we'll change out those bushings. I'm using this ball joint separator that I got from Harbor Freight. It works a little bit better than the old pickle fork method that gets wedged into the top. That seems to destroy the boot. This is a fairly safe way to do it, and you can see how it's set up. It's just a basic pivot, pushes on the bolt, and pulls the arm down. So it comes apart pretty quickly, and I'll demonstrate. So I got it set up. Takes a 19mm socket. So got it on. So I'm going to start putting a little bit of tension on it. That's it. Pops right off. So there it is. It's apart. The boot still intact, and we're set, ready to pull the upper control arm off. I've got the bolts backed out of the top, so that's going to be coming off. All right, we've got the upper control arm in the vise right now. I've got it set up with the ball joint service kit from Harbor Freight. And you can see how I have it set up. What we're going to do is we're going to push out, we're actually going to press out the rubber bushing, and I'm going right on the metal sleeve to get it out. This thing's set up for a 22mm socket. It takes a little bit of time, but once it starts moving, it goes pretty easily. You'll see it work here, starting to push through. Minimal effort, not too much effort on this. And you're limited on some of the collars that you have, but if you can get it through most of the way, I'm going to work it out. And that was it. Easy day. And what we'll do next is we'll clean up the insides. I'll get the other one off, and then I'll demonstrate how to put the new polyurethane bushings in. Now that the old bushings are out, we need to reuse the inner metal sleeve from the old bushings on the new urethane bushings. However, the rubber bushings are pretty much melted to the inner collar there, the inner sleeve. So what I'm going to demonstrate, here's what I do, is I'm going to take a hacksaw. I'm not going to be able to videotape it. Take a hacksaw and shave it down as close to the metal as you can without gouging the metal, and just kind of work your way around. And then after you get that off, most of it off, what I do is I take it and then put it on a wire wheel to clean it up. This is what the metal insert looks like after being cut off with a hacksaw, all the rubber cut off with a hacksaw. So next step is to clean it up on the complete rubber bushing with the metal insert melted into it. And then this is what we want. We want just the metal insert, so we're going to have to reuse that. So you need a good grinder with a wire wheel on it to polish it up. And this is what it looks like, ready for install. All right, getting ready to install the polyurethane bushings. According to Energy Suspension, they say to use this really sticky grease on every surface that these bushings are going to come in contact with metal. So we're going to coat the outside, put a thin layer on it, and then we're going to put a thin layer on the inside before we put the sleeves in. Alright, getting ready. I cleaned up the inside surfaces, brake cleaner on the inside, cleaned it up really good, got rid of all the any residue from the rubber. And then to install the rubber bushings, the upper control arms on the rear, they're split in half, and they go in pretty easily. So we're going to push in one side, and then we're going to push in the other side. And that's it. We're going to do that on both the front and back of the upper control arm. And now next what I'll do is I'll show you how we put in the center sleeve. Alright, so now we're going to put this sleeve inside the polyurethane bushing. I've got everything lubed up, got a nice coat of this monkey snot on here. So what we're going to do is just kind of, to get it started, I'm going to just get it inside. And then since I don't have a press, I'm going to use my vise and get it nicely squared up. And what we're going to do is just drive it in, nice and easy. And there we go, it's in. And then before we install, I'm going to clean it all up and put it back in the vehicle. So what we're going to do, we're going to install the upper control arm. We're going to put this in, we're going to attach it to the hub carrier. And we're going to attach it loosely, and then what I'm going to do is disconnect the sway bar, the shock, and the leaf spring bolt. And what we're going to do is leave the hub carrier on and the drive shaft on, and pull the lower control arm off. So that'll be the next step.
Alright, now we're disconnecting the lower control arm from the hub carrier. And you can see the nut, it'll back out only so far, and it hits the drive shaft. So what we're going to do at this point is just tap lightly on it, on the hub carrier with a hammer, and it will break free. You don't want to hit it too hard. Just lightly tap on it, and it'll eventually come loose. I tried using the fork on it that I have, the ball joint splitter, but it won't fit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Alright, we got the lower control arm off. The only thing that's really different between the lower and the upper is you have the shock mount. And Energy Suspension supplies a polyurethane bushing for the shock mount. So I demonstrated with the upper control arm how we get these off. I'm going to do the same with the lower control arm, including the shock mount, and we'll clean all the bushings up, get the collars, the sleeves done, reassemble it, and put it back together. So this is how, without a press, how I get the polyurethane bushings into the control arm. You got to be real careful with it. You gotta just slowly wedge it on. It'll slowly go in, but let's see if we can get this one started. And there, once it gets started, you get over that lip, it goes in pretty easily. And you can see I'll just run it the rest of the way in. Once I get this in all the way, I'll back it off a little, and we'll do the same thing with the insert that goes into it, the metal collar. Not the prettiest way to do it, but it functions. So we got it in most of the way. Back it off just a little bit. Kind of catch it on the edge. Push it in the rest of the way. And this thing does not want to go. Keep working it in. It's slowly working its way in. And there it goes. There we go. We got it in. Alright, so now we're going to press in the inner bearing, or the inner shaft there, the sleeve. On this one, it's got the collars on it. So I've got one collar on there. Let's see if we can get it in there. Get the second collar in. And just kind of press the whole thing together. There we go. That's how we do it. Alright, one of the challenges of putting this back together is putting the lower control arm back onto the hub carrier. What happens is the ball joint, the center part of the ball joint ends up spinning. Because of the drive shaft, you can't get an Allen head down to hold it. So a method I came up with is just to put a pry bar or something between the hub carrier and the shock brace. And what that does, it puts a little bit of pressure on the ball joint so you can actually tighten it with a wrench. You're limited on motion, you get maybe 1/8 of a turn at a time. If you didn't do that, you'd have to pretty much take the drive shaft off, put the bottom one on, and then come back up and tighten the top one. But this way you're able to do everything you're doing, able to do upper lower control arms without taking the drive shaft out, without messing with the brakes or the hub carrier, and you just do them independently, one at a time. So far it's been pretty effective. I've knocked out both sides. Took me a few hours to do each side, but so far it's all back together, and it's looking pretty good, and just hope the performance factor increases. But anyway, thanks for watching, and hopefully this helps somebody out who's trying to do this at home with a limited amount of tools or shop equipment. So I was able to do this whole thing without a press, so it's pretty significant. Anyway, hope it helps out. Thanks for watching.